The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. Amen. So the bad news was that at 7 o'clock I didn't have any sermons, and now I have 2.5. But I don't think they'll last 2.5 times the sermons. And one of them came from Lorne, who told me what he was going to preach on today, although not in its totality, I think. And then one came from Mer, so who suggested that it would be good to go and look at the meditation for the day that, as I've mentioned many times, arrives in my inbox every morning. So she encouraged without doing. But before I get into both 2.5 sermons, then the half is that there's a few things happened at work this week which I will link into it seamlessly and brilliantly. I didn't do my usual flow today, so it might not. We'll see. But my notice, which I forgot, was that any of you who have Kobos, and maybe the other sort, Kindles as well, you can get pretty much the entire works of C.S. Lewis for 2 times 99 cents, one for his fiction and one for his theological works. And it's actually a pretty good deal. Per word, it really is a good deal, I can tell you. So if you have a Kobo, I would recommend now is a good time to go and buy the works of C.S. Lewis. That was just a notice, nothing to do with the sermon whatsoever, because I've only read one chapter of one book and it would be wrong to talk about it. So what Lorne was going to preach on is this, and I'm going to embellish it slightly, because I don't think it's the same hurricane, but it doesn't matter. So when, quite a long time ago now, I went on vacation to Maine at about this time of year, I think, so it was hurricane season. And one of the things I really liked about Maine was that it has these covered bridges. They're really nice. But you have to drive to them, and it seems bizarre that you have to drive to a bridge, but there are signs on the road saying, drive 25 miles up this road to this lovely covered bridge, and you do, and it's really nice. And it came to mind anyway this morning because like the weather was like this, and it was the leaves were on the trees, and then one of the hurricanes came in. I forget which one, and I forget which one Lorne said as well, so it really doesn't matter. So hold the picture of a bridge miles away from anywhere in your head, but a pretty one, a really nice one. And then what Lorne was saying is, well, he was also thinking about hurricanes this morning. I guess we were all thinking about wind, and he was saying that his thought was, well, there was a community somewhere. Let's say it was in New York State because it'll make it easier. That they'd spent lots of money and time, and they'd built this really, really nice bridge over the river, and it was really good. And then whichever hurricane it was blew in, and it was so wild, and it rerouted the river, so that they were left with a bridge over nothing now, essentially, because there was no river flowing underneath there anymore. And then he was starting to imagine, well, what are the people round there? What are they saying? What are they doing? What are they saying? And my first thought was, well, you should build a pontoon bridge, that you can move around a bit more easily. You can chase the river. And so he was saying, well, yeah, you're an engineer. Yeah, just calm down. So he was thinking maybe people could build rafts. Maybe they could do things in a completely different way. And his analogy was that the bridge is like the church, and there's no point having a bridge that sits miles away from anywhere. There's no point having a bridge that crosses a river that is no longer there. And then I started thinking a bit like, well, actually, a good engineer would not immediately leap to a solution of, well, put in this light bridge, put this movable bridge in there. A good engineer would think, what are we really trying to do here? And then any good systems engineer will tell you start with the functional requirements, and you don't start with the solution in mind. So the functional requirement is the church is a many things, but the two that came to my mind were a place where you can get together to worship God communally and be part of a community, and a bridge between us and God. And so it felt to me that, well, actually, that's the real purpose of what we are as a church, is to be a bridge between here and God. And we need to put that bridge where people are, because if we have a bridge that's fantastically beautiful but miles away from anywhere, or a bridge that we thought we were building over a big river, but that big river actually isn't there anymore, it's not much use. Although it's nice that a few people drive 40 kilometres to go and see that beautiful covered bridge, it kind of makes no difference in their lives other than looking and saying, oh, that's nice. Whereas I think our real purpose is to be a real practical bridge that gets people, it can be beautiful as well, but as many bridges are, but a practical bridge that gets from us to God and allows us to come together. I'm pretty sure Lorne would have made it longer, but that was the essence of my 7 o'clock conversation with Lorne this morning. Meanwhile, I had texted Mer and said, Mer, I have no sermon. And she said, go look at the meditation. That's a good idea. But first, a couple of things happened at work this week. So the thing about bridges also made me think a little bit of when Jesus sent his disciples out into the world. He didn't say, go and build permanent structures. In fact, quite the opposite. What he said is, go take with you one purse. Walter will tell me exactly what it was. One purse, one staff, one cloak. Basically travel light. Don't burden yourselves down with things that you can't leave behind to do my will. And he also sent lots of people out. And so two things have happened this week that sort of made me think about that a bit at work. I'll come back to Matthew 10 is where it is for those of you who are interested in looking. So back to Matthew 10 later, but at work two things happened this week. One of which is before he left us, one of the managers was trying to get us to encourage us to be different at work, to behave differently to each other, to have different culture at work. And he pointed us at this book called Turn the Ship Around, which is about a US naval captain. And he was a submarine captain. And in the Navy, in the US Navy, I think in any good Navy, the captain's word is absolute. He is godlike in his demeanour, and he gives orders, and those orders are obeyed. And he was sent he'd got a ship which was in the top quartile of the US Navy for inspections. It was very, very good. He was their top captain, really good guy. And he was sent to a submarine that had got a real reputation for being awful, right at the bottom of the pile. Inspections were always finding things that weren't done. It was really bad. So he went and he decided he was going to do things differently. He was not going to just give orders. He was going to try and make people think. And the thing from the work thing was that instead of telling people what to do, try and get them to think what to do. So he said he started to ask people, well, what do you intend to do instead of go faster? What do you think we should do here? And try and get people putting themselves into his head so that they were kind of becoming more aligned with his direction. And then he got the whole crew together, and he was sort of pointing out, well, you're the guy in the engine room. Who knows the engines better, me or you? And well, obviously the guy in the engine room said, well, yeah, I know my engines pretty well. So this whole thing about where do you intend to go, where are you trying to go? That was the culture that he tried to get into his ship. And the way it comes back to the disciples piece is what he said to them, what he said to the crew when he had them all gathered together is there are 136 people on this boat. So it doesn't matter how good I am as the one guy, I can't do 136 people's work for you. I can't tell 136 people, do this, do this, do this. And I think that might have been what was in Jesus' head as well. He didn't give precise instructions to, you must go and tell this person that, you must go there. He gave them general instructions, travel light. Beware out there are wolves out there. You can go and read Matthew 10 yourself, the other instructions. So some of them were general, but it was more actually philosophy and direction he gave them, not detailed, do this, do this, do this, and if you don't do it, come back. So, and I think it's, going back to our bridges, I think it's sort of similar with what is our bridge, what is our church. We have one minister, and it's you need a leader, you need somebody to set direction, you need somebody to give counsel and guidance and be set tone. But on the other hand, there are 40 people in the church today. There were 20 this morning, no doubt, at 8:30. There are 60 of us who can choose to be disciples and go and do our own discipling, and we can go and be sent out to do things. So that was how that related to there. The second thing that happened at work this week is we had is more about behaviours and how people react when they are told to do something instead of given direction to go and do something. And the one thing you have to remember as the hook for this is, which I'll come back to again in a minute, is it doesn't matter how bad the Toronto Maple Leafs are, it doesn't make the Habs win the Stanley Cup. So it's a pity Daniel's not here, because he would recognise that. So just come back to that in a second. So what the message from this week at work was, it was about speak up for safety, is what it was called. And the premise of it is that 3/4 of all accidents where people get hurt, somebody else in the group knew that they were doing something dangerous, or had spotted something, or could have said something that would have prevented that accident because they knew it was going to happen, or they knew it was a kind of risky situation. 3/4. So that's a lot. Like, it's a lot of people who didn't go home from work, or lost fingers, or whatever happened. And I don't know whether that's just a generic statistic forever, or whether it's one just for my work, but probably it's generic, I would guess. And what this thing was trying to figure out is, well, two things. One of which is, like, if you see somebody doing something dangerous, say something. The other one of which was, well, actually, what happens when people say something? The how do you say it is really important, because, and rightly it was saying that even when somebody tells you something that could save your life, people's reaction tends to be that they're embarrassed, that they're defensive, that they sometimes even aggressive, that they shoot back. And similarly, if you're the person who should have said something, or you're the manager, and you kind of say the wrong thing in that situation, then, or somebody raises something to you as the manager, and then you ignore them or you shoot them down, they'll probably never say anything ever again. So it was about kind of, well, how do you get people to speak up and speak out about things that they know are right, but also how do you listen when people do speak up, and listen and hear. And where this links to the meditation this morning is, today's gospel had the Pharisee who was basically saying how glad he was that he wasn't like that guy over there. That, you know, I do all these things. I'm right. I'm right in everything I do. And the theme of the meditation that went with it was, well, who's he trying to convince here? Basically, that actually that's not wholesome. It's coming out of his own insecurity, his own defensiveness, his own trying to figure out where he is, and what it's saying is that, or what I observe as well, it's not just the meditation that it's saying, it's just sort of triggered some thoughts in my head, is that comparison can be quite useful. If you have a teacher, it's good to compare how you're doing with how they're showing you to do it. If you're a soccer player, it's good, or a hockey player, it's good to compare yourselves on skills. You know, see, what can I learn from these other people? What can I do? If you're a musician, I'm sure you learn from other people. If you're an engineer, you learn from other people. That's sort of how we learn, is sort of by comparing and by looking. Where it gets more dangerous is that when our own sense of being valued by God or valued by other people comes from that comparison, then it gets much less healthy. So, for example, the Pharisee, he's making himself good not because he's he's comparing himself to God, but because he's comparing himself to that other guy. Hence my thing about, it doesn't matter how bad the Maple Leafs are, they don't make the Montreal Canadiens win the Stanley Cup. That's Montreal that makes you make yourself win the cup, not because other people are bad. So the whole thing about there's this link between being so where my head's been at recently is there's this link between, are you competent at something? Do you have good skills? Are you able? Are you willing? Makes no difference at all to, are you valued by God? Are you worthwhile by God? Are you able to receive God's grace or not? The two are not linked, and that's really where the end game of today's gospel is, that it's not about whether the Pharisee is better than the tax collector, or even about whether we should be like the tax collector. It's about, don't compare yourself to other people. It's about your relationship with God, and from that will come how you are with other people. From that might come skills. From that might come lots of other things. But in the end, it's as our songs said today, it's we're all able to be children of God. We're all able to be accepted by God. And actually, for any of us, whether we're St. Peter or us, if God really judged us, then there will be no hope for any of us. So actually, stop comparing and just live our lives with God is, I think, the real message of this morning's gospel. backed up by the meditation from the Catholics. So I think that's pretty. I wrote more notes than that today, but I think that's mostly it. And I think the final bit is actually there's lots of celebration to come in it, just being about us and Jesus, and then the relationships flowing from that, because actually there's lots of misery that's caused by comparing ourselves to other people, or requiring other people's validation that we are good or that we're bad. Not that we did something well, but that we are good. There's a distinction there that I think it's good to make. That was what I was going to do. So we'll close with the other prayer on... I keep forgetting these really nice prayers. The whole purpose of doing the noonday service is that there are these lovely prayers here, and I keep forgetting them. So we'll close just with a moment of prayer on the one that starts for anyone who is in Christ, and then Jackie will lead us in our prayers. 57. For anyone who is in Christ, there is a new creation. The old creation has gone, and now the new one is here. It is all God's work. It was God who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the work of handing on this reconciliation. Amen.